Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast, 1 hour advanced English listening practice. Okay, that's the mandatory welcome done. Let's jump straight into our deep dive. Our mission today is really for you, the person who's operating in this incredibly high velocity world, who needs a shortcut. Not just to data, but to, a profound understanding. We are tackling that enormous and frankly, really frustrating challenge of lost meaning in our hyper-connected, fast-paced conversations.
It's a huge topic.
It is. I mean, think about the last time you left a quick briefing or you finished a rushed chat with a colleague, maybe even a terse argument with someone in your family, and that feeling you're left with isn't clarity, it's just confusion. You heard the words, sure, but you feel like you missed the entire context, the why, the real intention behind it all.
That feeling it's almost the background noise of modern life, isn't it? We have this abundance of information, but a real poverty of meaning.
Exactly, meaning poverty. I like that. So this deep dive is designed to be your navigational chart for that exact problem. We've gathered material that explains precisely how and why meaning just seems to fragment when dialogue speeds up.
The physics of conversational breakdown, you could call it.
Yeah, I love that, the physics of it. And then crucially, we're going to pivot to actionable strategies, how you can actively reconstruct that meaning. We want to move you beyond just, defending against misunderstanding and into an offensive application of knowledge. And we'll do that through the incredible power of storytelling to really cement complex ideas.
That's a great way to put it. The goal here is, it's pretty ambitious. It's not just about surviving information overload, which, let's be honest, a lot of people just accept as a part of life now.
Right, like a tax you have to pay.
Exactly. It's about achieving true, robust internalization and recall. When information is just flying past you, your brain defaults to a kind of survival mode. It grabs keywords, but it discards all the juicy stuff, the context, the connections. So we're aiming to help you retrain your cognitive process to handle that velocity, but retain the substance, to get to that kind of holistic understanding where you could immediately turn around and teach the concept to someone else or, apply it confidently in a really complex situation.
Okay, let's get into it then. Let's unpack this central contradiction. The sources we looked at all suggest that speed, the very thing we chase relentlessly in the modern workplace as, the ultimate measure of productivity, is actually the primary antagonist of clarity. If you rush through a briefing, you might think you're saving a few minutes, but you're probably just inviting a complete failure of comprehension down the line.
That is such a critical observation. The perception of efficiency, it just blinds us to the underlying cognitive costs.
Yeah.
We are all operating within fixed biological parameters, and the primary constraint is something we can call the velocity vortex.
The velocity vortex.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it sounds suitably dramatic. So how exactly does speed pull the rug out from under our ability to understand?
Well, it all starts with the limitations of our own internal processing unit. Your brain. It operates like a processor with very specific limits on its throughput. So when you get a torrent of data complex instructions, multiple metrics, a flurry of emotional details, the system just gets overwhelmed.
This is information overload.
That's the one. And the immediate consequences of hitting that limit are pretty stark.
Okay, so what happens inside our heads?
Your working memory, which is the system that's responsible for actively holding and, manipulating information for short periods, it has an extremely limited capacity.
I've heard this. It's something like 7 items.
Depending on the complexity, it's about 4 to 7 chunks of information at any given time. So if the data is coming in too fast, you get one of 2 outcomes. The brain starts shedding information indiscriminately.
So you just remember random bits and pieces.
Right. You get fragments, but you lose the crucial context that connects them. Or you experience a complete cognitive blockage where the system basically freezes and nothing lands. It doesn't matter how important it was.
And to fight that overwhelming feeling, our minds immediately start looking for shortcuts, cognitive shortcuts. This sounds like a real double-edged sword, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Shortcutting is necessary for survival, but it's incredibly dangerous for meaning. To keep pace with the speaker, your mind starts making these immediate, often subconscious assumptions.
It's filling in the blanks.
It's filling in the blanks based on what you think the speaker meant. pulling from old mental models or outdated experiences. So for example, your manager rapidly mentions a shift in priorities. Your brain immediately links that to the last major priority shift, even if the situation is totally different.
I've definitely done that.
We all have. You latch onto the key words, the deadline, the metric, but you miss the crucial nuances that change the entire direction of the project. And that's the difference between an efficient guess and a truly dangerous assumption.
And I find there's a huge cognitive difference between processing something written versus spoken. I mean, if it's documented, I can go back, I can reread it. Fast dialogue, though, suffers from a real absence of redundancy.
That is a fundamental constraint. Written communication has built-in pauses. You have paragraphs, headings, the ability to stop and reflect. Spoken word, especially when it's rushed, it just strips all of that away.
Right, there are no cognitive processing windows.
None. And when you're dealing with complex, multi-step ideas, your brain needs a few seconds of temporal space to properly encode the information. Without that natural repetition or pauses, the complexity just washes over you, and the detailed encoding simply doesn't happen.
So the speaker thinks they've communicated everything.
And the listener only retained the first couple of data points before their system, metaphorically crashed.
And in that rush to just capture the words, we're also dramatically reducing the richness of the message by ignoring nonverbal cues.
It's an information triage problem. That's a great way to think about it. The listener is so desperate just to process the linguistic beta that they completely overlook the crucial and often contradictory contextual information being conveyed by the speaker's body.
Like what specifically?
Well, we're talking about a quick flicker of irritation, maybe a hesitant shrug, or a burst of confident energy. If a project leader delivers a complex instruction with a smile and a calm voice, but their hands are visibly shaking,
I see.
or they're avoiding eye contact, that tells a dual story. The words say, "This is easy," but the body is screaming, "This is precarious." If you're only focused on the literal words, you miss that crucial hint that things might be way more challenging or risky than they appear on the surface. That nonverbal context is essential to correctly calibrating the meaning of the message. And, that velocity vortex, it's amplified by several factors beyond just the speed. These are the silent saboteurs that actively erode meaning, even when someone is speaking at a totally reasonable pace. The complexity is often baked right into the language itself.
Okay, so let's get into those. The first one is a classic, the insider barrier, jargon and acronyms.
Yes, they serve a vital function for insiders, right? They allow for lightning-fast communication within a defined group. But for outsiders, they are an impenetrable barrier. They create two parallel communication tracks, the informed and the completely bewildered.
Can you give us an example of that in action?
Sure. Let's imagine an internal marketing meeting. The team is discussing the need to increase MQLs and optimize the CAC.
Marketing qualified leads and customer acquisition cost.
Right. Now, a new analyst in that meeting who is unfamiliar with those terms is going to spend the next 5 minutes trying to mentally define MQL and CAC, while the rest of the strategic discussion just rushes right past them. They're not listening anymore, they're translating, and they lose the entire context of the discussion.
And related to that kind of efficiency is just the laziness of ambiguous language. We rely way too heavily on these subjective words that lack any precise shared definition.
Words like soon, important, good, high priority, or a lot. They're conversational quicksand. If a supervisor tells a contractor, "We need that construction finished soon," what does that actually mean? Hours, days. If the contractor interprets soon based on their heavy workload, let's say 3 weeks, but the supervisor meant next 3 days because there's an inspection coming up.
Catastrophe.
It's a catastrophic misalignment. All because a subjective word left this huge, unverified room for personal interpretation, meaning it requires objective, measurable language.
But even with objective language, our individual experiences always inject noise into the channel, don't they? Because of our different contexts and backgrounds.
This is one of the most subtle saboteurs. Two people can hear the exact same words and interpret them in vastly different ways because their priorities or life experiences just color their understanding.
So give us an example of that.
Okay, think of a business leader discussing the need for agile methodology. Now, the leader, they might be focused on faster delivery cycles, getting the product out the door. The employee listening, however, who's struggling under constant deadline pressure, hears agile methodology as simply working even longer hours.
Well, yeah.
Both heard the same term, but their contexts, one of strategic pressure, one of workload pressure, led them to two opposing interpretations that are just going to lead to conflict and wasted effort down the line.
We also have to acknowledge the power of emotional overlays. How we feel, or how the speaker feels, acts as this dynamic filter on the message.
Emotion is a potent encoding and decoding mechanism. I mean, stress, anxiety, excitement, even mild annoyance can dramatically color an otherwise factual statement.
So the emotion becomes the message.
In many ways, yes. A manager might state, "We have a significant volume of data coming in this week." Factually, that's neutral. But if they deliver it with a sigh of visible, grinding exhaustion because they're frustrated with recent delays, the listener decodes it as, "This is an overwhelming, impossible task that I'm going to suffer through."
Right.
The emotion shifts the entire meaning from a neutral observation to a negative pronouncement of suffering. We often react to the emotion long before we ever process the fact.
And the final, critical tripwire, which is often tied so deeply to organizational culture, is the lack of psychological safety.
This is the mechanism that prevents meaning from ever being reconstructed in the first place. When an environment is culturally hostile and people fear asking a clarifying question.
They don't want to look slow or incompetent.
Exactly. They fear they'll appear ignorant, so they choose self-preservation. They feign understanding, they nod, they agree, they walk away completely confused, and they just wait for the inevitable moment when their lack of understanding causes an error.
So that fear of vulnerability just perpetuates the cycle.
It perpetuates a dangerous cycle that remains completely undetected until significant damage is done to a project or, to a relationship.
Okay, so we understand the physics of how meaning gets lost.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the practical consequences. If meaning fragments in that velocity vortex, what does that actually look like for you, the listener, the professional, or the partner in the real world?
The consequences are far from trivial. They are serious, they're tangible, and they cascade like a set of dominoes, often starting with just a tiny initial confusion that results in massive damage or opportunity cost.
Let's start with the most tangible professional cost, which has to be inefficiency and rework.
Misunderstood instructions are the single greatest generator of waste in any organization. If a team member walks away believing they were told to implement solution A, but the actual priority was solution B, they've just wasted hours, maybe days, on the wrong thing.
And that's not just a time cost, it's a morale cost.
It's hugely demoralizing. Having to scrap completed work and start over, that feeling of just spinning your wheels is incredibly corrosive to motivation. Rework is consistently cited as one of the largest silent drains on productivity and budget.
And the impact extends so powerfully beyond the office, doesn't it? It affects our relational health. We're talking about damaged relationships.
Absolutely. In your personal life, the subjective nature of ambiguous language, combined with those emotional overlays we talked about, is just the perfect recipe for conflict.
So you might have meant something completely neutral.
But because the speed of the exchange or the emotional charge prevented proper clarification, the other person interprets your words as an attack or a slight or just indifference. And once that interpretation settles in, it quickly leads to resentment, hurt feelings, and a breakdown of trust that is exceedingly difficult to repair.
Because you rarely go back and address the core communication failure.
Almost never. The lost meaning is just left to fester.
And in business or academic contexts, this loss translates directly into existential costs. I'm talking about missed opportunities.
Strategic information is often delivered in these fleeting moments. A brief mention during a Q&A session, a subtle reference in a client meeting, a quick comment about a competitor's move.
Things that are easy to miss if you're not fully tuned in.
Exactly. If you fail to grasp that nugget of information, or worse, you dismiss it as unimportant because of the rush of the conversation, your organization can miss substantial strategic advantages. A key market trend, a technological pivot, a crucial piece of client feedback. If that's not fully internalized and acted upon, it can translate into millions of dollars in lost revenue.
So that brief moment of lost meaning in a hallway conversation can reshape an entire fiscal quarter.
It absolutely can.
And when this environment of confusion becomes the norm, the consequences become systemic. They start to erode the fundamental fabric of the team, leading to decreased morale and an erosion of trust.
Yes. Constant, repetitive miscommunication creates an atmosphere that feels perpetually frustrating, chaotic, and inefficient. It signals a fundamental lack of coordination.
People start to doubt each other.
They start to doubt the competency of their teammates, their leaders. They might even start to doubt their own ability to understand. I mean, why bother putting in maximum effort if you know your work is likely to be misinterpreted, misunderstood, or just sent back for rework anyway?
Right.
The trust diminishes, motivation plummets, and the cycle just accelerates, making all future communication even less effective. Clarity is the foundation of confidence and confusion. Well, confusion is the foundation of a toxic organizational culture.
Okay, we have thoroughly diagnosed the problem. Now let's shift to the solution. How do we fight back against the velocity vortex? The answer seems to require disciplined practice and very intentional communication. We need defensive tactics to prevent the loss and offensive tactics to recover, meaning that's already gone astray.
And we begin with a foundation, which is not intuitive for most people because it requires rigorous self-management. And that is active listening.
Active listening. It's so much more than just hearing, isn't it? It's a commitment to process, interpret, and respond to the complete message, including all the hidden cues and unspoken intent.
It demands intentionality, and it starts with full attention and presence. In our multitasking world, this is a revolutionary act. You have to minimize the physical distractions, your phone, your laptop, the browser tabs, but the crucial battle is internal.
The internal chatter.
That's it. You have to cultivate mental focus by actively pushing away that chatter. Don't let your mind draft your clever response, or recall an unrelated event, or judge the speaker's delivery while they are still talking. You have to create genuine mental space to absorb their message fully, not just listen for the pause where you can jump in.
In achieving a non-judgmental stance, that's where the emotional discipline really comes into play.
Yeah.
Especially if the topic is sensitive or if you already have a strong counter-opinion.
Absolutely. If you approach a speaker thinking, I know exactly why they're wrong about this, you will filter their entire message through that lens. You'll only hear the parts that confirm your pre-existing belief. You'll miss any subtlety or nuance that might actually change your mind or even just improve your own counter-argument.
So you have to temporarily suspend your own convictions.
Just for the duration of their statement, dedicate yourself purely to understanding their unique reality and perspective.
So once that mental space is achieved, we need to observe and absorb the full dual story, the verbal and the nonverbal.
This is where we fuse all the data points together. Listen intently for the gist, the primary intention of the communication, but pay equally close attention to the tone, the emotion, the body language.
So if a manager is giving a very upbeat sales projection,
but you notice they keep nervously checking their watch, that contradiction is a data point. It suggests that while the numbers might be good, there could be a tight constraint, a short time frame, an external deadline that requires careful attention. The contradiction often holds the deepest meaning.
So active listening prevents the initial loss, but clarification is the active process of filling in the inevitable gaps. We have to be proactive here.
Indeed. We need strategic, targeted questioning that pulls ambiguity out of the shadows and into the light.
Starting with asking clarifying questions. These are the tools of precision.
Right. These questions immediately target those vague or subjective terms. So if a team member says, the client needs that data improved, that's subjective. Your clarifying question has to replace that adjective with a measurable standard.
So you would ask something like,
improved in what way? Are we optimizing for speed, cost efficiency, or visual presentation?
Or, using the time-based ambiguity we talked about, if a supervisor says, we need to finalize this process soon.
You must transform that word into an actionable date or time frame, you could ask. When you say soon, is this a priority for this afternoon, or are you hoping to have a defined plan by the end of the fiscal week? By providing clear alternatives, you force the speaker to commit to a precision that the word soon just naturally lacks.
It's the difference between hoping you're right and knowing you're right.
It is.
Next up, we use open-ended questions to encourage deeper elaboration. This shifts the focus from a simple yes or no to active synthesis.
We have to retire that ineffective question, do you understand? It's a closed question that just invites a quick, face-saving yes.
So what's a better alternative?
You invite elaboration that forces the learner to actively synthesize and articulate the material. You could try. What are your first 2 priority steps based on what I just explained? Or, if you had to explain this new protocol to a colleague, what are the 3 essential takeaways you'd focus on?
And if the conversation is more about emotional or relational dynamics, say a colleague says, I'm having trouble with the new team leader.
An open-ended follow-up avoids minimizing their concern. So instead of, is everything okay, you would ask, could you walk me through an example of a situation where you felt the difficulty was most pronounced? Or what parts of the new leader's style are causing the most confusion for you? This encourages narrative and detail, which gets you to a much deeper understanding.
The ultimate confirmation technique, though, remains paraphrasing and summarizing. And you mentioned this serves a dual critical purpose.
It's vital. First, it's a self-check. Summarizing confirms your understanding, and it allows the speaker to immediately correct any misinterpretation before you go off and act on bad information.
And the second purpose?
Second, and this is often more powerful, it profoundly validates the speaker. By repeating their complex message back to them clearly and concisely, you are showing them that their words were important enough for you to dedicate real mental energy to processing. This validates their voice and builds critical rapport.
Can you give us a robust professional example of a summary in action?
Sure. After a detailed, fast-paced strategy meeting, you might interject with, okay, to make sure I have this locked in, it sounds like the crucial pivot point is moving the budget from Project X to Project Y by the end of the quarter, primarily because the Q3 market data showed a faster erosion of that legacy segment than we anticipated. Is that the key strategic shift?
I see. You're demonstrating you understood the what and the why.
Exactly. You're ensuring alignment before anyone moves forward. So we've covered external tactics. Now we have to move to the internal discipline required, particularly around managing the assumptions that are the silent saboteurs of fast communication.
How do you consciously pause a fast conversation to actively check assumptions?
Assumptions are just mental shortcuts based on past patterns, but they can derail new meaning. You have to deliberately install a kind of mental stop sign and ask yourself, what assumption am I making right now about the speaker's intent or the urgency or the outcome based on my past experience?
And once you identify it,
you have to actively seek verification. For instance, if you assume a colleague's brief, abrupt email is dismissive, you need to verify that. You could say, I noticed your reply was quick. I want to make sure I'm not interrupting a pressing deadline. Are you free for a 5-minute chat, or should we schedule time next week? You address the assumption dismissiveness by checking the reality, which might just be busyness.
This concept is tied very heavily to the ladder of inference. We hear about this model, but how do we actually apply it for meaning reconstruction?
The ladder of inference describes how rapidly we jump from the small set of observable data we select, up through layers of interpretation and assumption, to reach an ironclad conclusion or belief. When meaning is fragmented, we're usually operating way too high on that ladder at the conclusion level.
So meaning reconstruction requires consciously climbing down the ladder.
Exactly. Let's use a concrete workplace anecdote. A team member, let's call him Mark, rushes past you and slams his office door.
Okay, the observable data is simple. Mark slammed the door.
Right. But if you jump to the top of the ladder, your conclusion is, Mark is angry at me because he hates my proposal. To climb down, you ask, what evidence made me conclude that Mark is angry at me? You move back toward observable data, you confirm you saw him slam the door, but you have no data linking that action to your proposal.
So what do?
Reconstruction demands you stop at the observation level and verify. You go to Mark and say, hey, I noticed you seemed stressed when you came back. Is everything okay? You base your next action on shared, verifiable data. The observed stress, not the subjective conclusion that he's mad at you. The latter helps us distinguish between fact and fear.
Finally, reconstruction can only really flourish in a specific kind of environment. We need to focus on creating a safe space.
Psychological safety is the lubricant for meaning. It's the assurance that admitting you're confused won't lead to punishment, ridicule, or demotion. And this starts with leadership, or in a relationship, the person with the greater emotional security modeling vulnerability.
So you have to be the first to admit you don't understand.
Be the first to say, I apologize, I was thinking about 3 things at once and I missed that last point. Could you break that down again, please? This shows everyone that vulnerability is acceptable. Furthermore, you have to explicitly encourage questions. Say things like, if this is confusing, that's my failure as a communicator, not yours as a listener. Please ask.
And you have to practice patience.
Critically.
Yeah.
Allow for processing pauses. Resist that urge to fill every silence. Give your listener the time they need to synthesize, articulate their confusion, and ask for clarification.
Okay, so we've built the defensive foundation with listening and established recovery tactics with clarification. Now, we transition to what you call the ultimate offensive tool, the transformative power in narrative. Why is it that when meaning is fragmented, telling a story provides the cohesive framework that locks everything into place?
Because humans are profoundly wired for stories, our brains are, at their core, narrative engines. Storytelling taps into these ancient cognitive mechanisms that make information stick in a way that, dry data and bullet points never can.
Okay, so first, stories impose structure for chaos.
Right. Disparate facts, a list of features, a sequence of regulations are incredibly difficult to recall and apply. They're just isolated items. Stories, however, impose a logical, universal flow: setup, conflict, resolution. This linear arc transforms that scattered pile of information into a navigable map that the brain can process and retain much more easily. It gives the brain an immediate filing structure.
They also provide vital contextual anchors.
Yes. A good narrative immediately answers the who, what, when, where, why, and how. This embeds the information within a rich context. For example, instead of just listing a company's new security policy rules, you tell the story of the day before the policy was implemented, when a data breach occurred because of a loophole.
And now the rules aren't arbitrary.
Exactly. Now they're embedded in the context of avoiding a crisis. Context is the essential glue of memory. It's what makes facts meaningful and applicable.
And perhaps the most powerful difference between data and a story: emotional engagement.
Facts inform, but stories move people. By tying information to characters, conflicts, and resolutions, stories evoke powerful emotions: interest, surprise, empathy, frustration, triumph. When a message is charged with emotion, the hippocampus in your brain is activated, and it forges a much stronger, more durable connection to the information.
So we remember how we felt during the story.
We do, and that emotional hook serves as a potent retrieval cue for all the factual details later on.
And they are incredibly effective as an illustrative power tool for transforming abstract concepts into something concrete.
Absolutely. If you're debating the abstract concept of user friction in software design, statistics about abandoned shopping carts can feel, abstract. Instead, tell the story of Sarah, a specific customer who spent 20 minutes trying to check out, encountered 5 confusing screens, and ultimately just rage quit the process.
That narrative makes friction tangible.
Tangible, visible, and deeply relatable. It drives home the lesson of smooth user design far more effectively than a slide full of generalized statistics.
Okay, let's apply this power. In the professional sphere, how can we use narrative to move beyond bullet points?
Well, when you're explaining complexity, let's say you're rolling out a new ERP system, don't just list the features. Tell the story of the organizational transformation.
What does that sound like?
Describe how the sales team used to struggle with the old fragmented system. That's the conflict. Talk about how they almost lost a major client. That's the climax. And then show how the new system immediately streamlined their workflow, allowing them to close that crucial deal and even achieve a better work-life balance. That's the resolution. That narrative defines the value instantly, not just the technical specs.
And when you're proposing a strategy or trying to get buy-in for a risky change, the narrative becomes a kind of shared vision.
Precisely. If you're proposing a high-risk market entry, don't just present the financial projections. Tell the team's hero's journey.
The hero's journey.
Outline the story of the current challenge, the market decline, the bold decision to pivot, the turning point, the known obstacles you'll face together, the conflict, and then paint a vivid picture of the successful future state once you achieve the objective. That's the triumph. This builds consensus not just on numbers, but on the shared identity and purpose of the team.
And when learning from mistakes, like a major project setback, narrative helps in sharing lessons learned.
Debriefs should always be narratives, not just incident reports. Instead of stating, "We missed the deadline because of a dependency failure," tell the story of the challenge.
Walk us through it.
Describe the sequence of events that led to the issue, the critical moment where the team made the wrong choice, the surprising turns, and the ultimate lessons learned at each stage of that crisis. This makes the learning stick because it's contextualized by failure and resolution, ensuring the team is far less likely to repeat the same plotline.
Storytelling is equally vital in our personal lives for deepening connections and reconstructing emotional meaning.
Yes. If a rapid, stressful exchange led to an argument, use a narrative later to clarify the emotional context. Instead of just apologizing, you might say, "I want to tell you the story of what was happening for me when we were talking earlier. I had just received some upsetting news, and I brought that tension into our conversation, which is why my words sounded short and sharp."
That narrative provides the context for the emotion.
It clarifies your intent and prevents the other person from filling in the blank with a negative assumption about you.
Or when someone makes a brief statement about how they feel, like, "I'm exhausted."
If they just spate the emotion, it can be interpreted as generalized fatigue. But if you encourage them to share a brief personal anecdote, I'm exhausted because I had to get up at 4 a.m. for that delayed flight, then spent 3 hours in meetings and I haven't even had a chance to eat. That short story invites you into their situation. It offers context and fosters deeper, more informed empathy.
This is where we deliver the goods. We want you, the listener, to feel equipped to move from being a passive receiver of fragmented data to an active reconstructor, confident reteller of meaning. We are giving you the toolkit to become the architect of your own knowledge.
Mastering these techniques is paramount because it allows you to take ownership of the knowledge you're receiving. It gives you a tangible framework to organize the chaos and ensure retention.
Okay, before we dive into the 7 techniques, let's quickly review the principles that ensure a story actually aids learning rather than just entertains.
First, clarity and simplicity must be prioritized above all else. The story has to use simple, direct language. If specialized jargon is absolutely unavoidable, you must explain it immediately and integrate it into the narrative so the listener isn't momentarily lost.
Right. The complexity should be in the concepts, not the vocabulary.
Exactly. And second, every effective learning story needs a clear, structured arc.
Even a brief professional anecdote.
Even the briefest one. It has to adhere to that universal path. The setup, the conflict, the climax or turning point, the resolution, and most importantly, a clear takeaway or moral. That arc is the structure that our brains have evolved to latch onto for memory.
And finally, the story must be explicitly purpose-driven.
You need to be clear about the intended learning goal. Is the purpose to help the learner understand a technical concept, internalize a complex process, or gain emotional insight? When the purpose is clear, you know exactly what core meaning to extract and retain from the narrative.
Okay, let's run through the 7 practical, detailed methods you can use immediately after a rushed conversation or when trying to solidify fragmented information. Let's start with number 1.
Number 1 is repeated read-alouds with reflective questioning. This is phenomenal for understanding processes, procedural narratives, or even the motives behind a fast strategic decision. It requires you to retell the story, pausing frequently to probe for motivations and consequences.
Let's start with a technical application. Say a software engineer just explained a complex debugging process, a fast sequence of steps involving several different systems.
Okay, so the initial story is fast. I ran the diagnostic, saw the error code, cross-referenced the log, applied the patch, and restarted the server. To reconstruct the meaning, you have them retell it. Okay, tell me about the first step. You ran the diagnostic and then...
And when they say, I saw the error code, you interrupt.
You interrupt with a reflective question. Why did you need to see the error code? What information did that give you that the initial diagnostic didn't? This forces them to articulate the motive, that the error code pointed to a specific subsystem, and the consequence, it told them which log to check next. By asking about motive and consequence at every step, you transform a sequence of arbitrary steps into a logical, understandable decision-making journey.
Number 2 is picture cards or story dice prompts. This uses foundational narrative prompts, who, what, where, when, why, to force you to organize a rushed update into recognizable story components.
This is ideal for imposing structure onto chaos. Let's take a rapid cross-functional update. The procurement team delayed the vendor contract review until next Tuesday because the legal team discovered a new compliance issue late Friday afternoon, which impacts our deployment schedule next month.
That's a dense update. How do the prompts help stabilize the meaning?
You force a structural retell. You ask, who are the key characters in this story? Procurement, legal, the vendor. What was the core conflict or twist? The new compliance issue. When did this critical event happen and when does it impact the project? Issue discovered late Friday, deployment impacted next month. And most critically, what is the why, the driving motivation, ensuring legal compliance? This process forces you to filter that torrent of details into a clean, logical narrative structure.
Moving on to number 3, retelling with specific questions. This is for core information recall.
Right. This reinforces recall immediately after the information is delivered, ensuring that all the key details, the specific metrics, dates, and names, are captured, not just the general idea.
Let's use the example of onboarding a new team member with specific procedural knowledge, like expense reporting, that's often delivered in a 5-minute rush.
The rapid instruction might be, submit receipts within 48 hours for anything over $50, digital copies only, use the Concur platform, and manager approval is required by the end of Friday. If the new employee just says, I understand, you haven't validated anything.
You have to follow up immediately.
Immediately with targeted, specific questions. What is the exact deadline for submitting a receipt? 48 hours. What is the minimum monetary threshold for needing a receipt? $50. Which specific platform did I mention? Concur. By asking questions that demand precise data retrieval, you confirm the details are locked in.
Number 4 is role-playing or simulation. This is for experiential understanding.
This takes an abstract conversation or instruction and makes it concrete. The body and mind are actively engaged. It connects theory to practice immediately. Think about a customer service script for de-escalation.
The written instruction might be clear, but the emotional reality is missing.
Exactly. So you role play the scenario. Okay, I'm the irate customer, you're the agent. What is the customer's story of the problem, and how do you narrate your solution story back to them? The learner has to recount the customer's frustration and then demonstrate the soft skills needed to validate that emotion before delivering the factual solution. This helps them internalize the conversational flow far better than just reading a manual.
Number 5, the and then method. This one is deceptively simple.
It's a single, powerful prompting question that encourages continuous elaboration. It forces the learner to uncover and articulate the overlooked critical steps that fast conversations often skip over.
So how does it work?
Let's take a decision that was quickly summarized. We decided to greenlight the project after the legal review, but we still need final executive sign-off before launch. You use the method to flesh out that narrative. The project was greenlit, and then learner, legal signed off. And then learner, we prepared the launch package, and then learner, we sent it to the executive team. This continuous prompting ensures the entire sequence is fully articulated and understood.
Okay, number 6 is visual storytelling, which is especially good for abstract concepts.
Yes. For visual learners, or when dealing with things like data processing or systems architecture, drawing the story is transformative. You encourage sketching or diagramming the story of the idea.
Because abstraction is where the velocity vortex can be most damaging.
It is. Consider explaining a complex budget distribution. Verbally, it's a list of transfers and percentages. To reconstruct it, you say, let's draw the journey of the money. The learner draws a dollar sign. What's the first plot point? They draw an arrow splitting the budget. This visual narrative takes an invisible process and makes it entirely tangible and sequential.
And finally, number 7, what if scenarios. This is for understanding implications.
Once the basic story is understood, this final technique tests for deeper comprehension. You explore alternative plot lines to test the robustness of the learning.
Give me an example.
Let's use an emergency protocol that was quickly briefed. In the event of a system failure, the backup server automatically takes over and IT is alerted. That's the success story. Now you introduce a plot twist. Okay, but what if the network connection between the two servers is unstable? What's the alternative story that happens then?
And that forces the learner to internalize the secondary protocols.
Exactly. Manual failover, local data access. It tests their comprehension of how the procedure holds up under stress. It makes the learning robust against unexpected real-world conflicts.
So by embracing these 7 techniques, you, the listener, can entirely shift your identity from being a passive recipient to an active narrator.
You gain ownership over the knowledge, you identify the gaps, you build confidence in your ability to articulate complex ideas, and you ensure that meaning, even if it was initially fragmented by speed, is successfully reconstructed and retained.
The ability to actively reconstruct lost meaning is, as we have thoroughly explored today, a non-negotiable skill for navigating modern velocity. The world is only getting faster, and ambiguity is only increasing. Active listening and precise clarification techniques provide that robust defensive foundation we all need.
But it is the tool of storytelling, what I called the ultimate cognitive cheat code, that truly transforms fleeting words into lasting understanding. It provides the necessary structure, context, and emotional resonance to overcome the fragmentation inherent in fast dialogue.
We encourage you to embrace the role of the active narrator in all aspects of your life. Use these tools, the visual aids, the role-playing, the and-thens, and the ladder of inference, to organize the chaos you receive, to build confidence in your communication, and to ensure that you are truly understanding the world and the people around you.
And the continuous practice of connection through these strategies leads not just to clearer communication and professional efficiency, but to the profound satisfaction of truly understanding and, equally important, of being truly understood. Embrace the storyteller within to reclaim those echoes of meaning that so often vanish in the rush.
And as always, if you enjoyed this deep dive, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something really subtle but also incredibly powerful in how we communicate. We're exploring the art of decoding the unfinished sentence.
That's right. We're tackling those linguistic loose ends. You know, the phrases that just kind of hang in the air.
Like when someone says, I was thinking about that time when, and they just stop.
Exactly. Or if only we could just, and we often see these as, frustrating gaps, maybe even sloppy communication. But our whole mission today is to reframe that completely.
Right, because these aren't just mistakes. We're going to look at them as invitations, really. Invitations to a deeper level of understanding.
Precisely. And for you listening, this isn't just some academic exercise. Learning how to decode what's unsaid, it's basically a superpower.
A superpower, I like that. I mean, think about it. Navigating a tricky conversation at work or just connecting better with your family.
It's the skill that separates a good listener from a truly perceptive one. It's a game changer.
So the value here is just huge. It's about hearing what's underneath the words, the real intent. Today we'll cover the psychology, the why behind it. Then we'll give you a practical toolkit for context and cues.
And we'll even look at how something like storytelling can help you master all of this.
Okay, so let's unpack this. I want to start with the really fascinating stuff. The mechanics of why our brains do this in the first place. Why do we leave thoughts incomplete?
Well, when a thought doesn't quite become a full sentence, linguists have a term for it. It's called anacolothon.
Anacolothon. Okay, that's a mouthful. For most of us, it's just trailing off.
It is. But what's crucial to understand right from the start is that this is rarely a sign of, not being able to articulate something. It's very often a choice, either a deliberate one or more likely a subconscious one that's rooted in efficiency.
That seems so counterintuitive to me. If the goal is clear communication, wouldn't we want to use more energy to be explicit, not less?
You'd think so, but our brains are wired for shortcuts. The number one driver here is conserving cognitive energy. I mean, the brain is an incredibly resource-hungry organ.
Right.
And language is maybe the most demanding thing we do all day. So if your brain can calculate, in a split second, that the listener already has 80% of the information, why waste the energy saying the last 20%?
So it's a kind of high-speed collaborative shortcut. It assumes we're on the same page.
That's the perfect way to put it. It's all based on this idea of common ground, which researchers like Herbert Clark have detailed. It's the mutual knowledge and assumptions we share with someone.
For shared history, our shared environment.
All of it.
Yeah.
That shared database lets us skip ahead. It speeds up the conversation dramatically.
Which really changes the dynamic, doesn't it? It's not just two people sending information back and forth. It's two people actively building meaning together. So if I'm with a colleague and we've been working on this awful project for months, I don't need to explain the whole backstory. I can just say, if we could just get sign-off from.
And they know instantly.
They know. I mean, the legal department, that takes forever.
That's the perfect example of how it works in a professional setting. But it's so much more than just efficiency. It's also a really, really nuanced tool for emotional signaling.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Signal vulnerability. If someone starts a really difficult sentence like, I feel like maybe we should, and then they stop, that silence is just, it's heavy with meaning.
Yeah, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
The full thought, maybe it's breakup or admit I was wrong, is just too hard to say out loud. So they stop. They're sort of testing the waters, hoping you'll understand the difficulty, maybe even finish the thought for them.
And take some of that burden off of them.
Exactly. But it's not always about vulnerability. It can also be a very tactical, very powerful move.
Okay. How so? In a negotiation, for instance.
In a negotiation, it is a critical tool. Imagine two companies are hammering out a deal. One side says, if we agree to the terms in Article 4, then the long-term impact on your supply chain will be. And then they just trail off.
Ooh, that's a power move.
It is, because they're doing two things. One, they're signaling a hidden threat without actually stating it. But more importantly, they're forcing the other side to fill in that blank.
So you make your opponent voice their own worst fear.
You make them articulate their worst case scenario. It reveals their hand, their anxieties, all without you having to be the bad guy. It's a subtle way to exert control.
That's a much more sophisticated way of looking at it than just, someone avoiding conflict. It's an intentional rhetorical device.
It can be, absolutely.
So how do we tell the difference? How do we know if it's an intentional power move versus just, an accidental slip of the tongue?
That really comes down to the other cues, the nonverbal ones. An accidental slip usually comes with a quick correction or, a lot of ums and ofs.
A bit of fumbling.
Right. But the intentional rhetorical trailing off, that's often marked by deliberate pause, controlled body language, eye contact that really invites you to engage. The speaker is confident in the ambiguity they're creating.
And this whole process, it starts really early, doesn't it? I mean, this is how kids learn to communicate.
Absolutely. Think of a toddler. They point at a cookie jar and say, I want the
Yeah.
And they're relying completely on the gesture. They intuitively get that you're a partner in making the meaning.
And we just refine that as adults.
We refine it into tools for humor, for suspense, for emphasis, a narrator in a thriller saying, and then, out of nowhere. That pause is everything. The human brain's need for completion just pulls the audience right in.
So if we pull all of that together, the main takeaway here is that when someone trails off, it's not a failure. It's actually a declaration of trust. They're trusting that you and they share enough common ground.
That is the critical insight. The speaker is shifting the burden of interpretation to you, the decoder.
Yeah.
And understanding that. Well, that's the foundation for the entire decoding toolkit we're about to build.
Okay, so if psychology is the why, then context has to be the how. It's the foundation. I mean, without context, an unfinished sentence is just noise. With context, it's revelation.
It's a potent filter. Context is what narrows down the infinite possibilities of what that missing word could be to just one or two probable options. And we have to start with the history of the conversation itself.
You can't just drop in and decode a fragment in isolation. You have to know the backstory, the trajectory of the conversation. That's layer one of the toolkit.
Let's use a professional example. Imagine you're a consultant working with a company that just went through a really messy merger. The meeting is about corporate culture. An executive who is clearly frustrated leans back and says, based on our decision last week about Q4 staffing, I feel like this new HR policy would only serve to.
And he stops there. It's a vague, potentially explosive fragment, but if you've been tracking the conversation history,
which has been all about burnout and resistance to the merger,
then you immediately know what he means. The decode is something like, would only serve to demoralize the new teams even more, or maybe increase the number of people quitting.
Exactly. And if you can respond right away with something like, so that the concern is this might hurt morale right now, we could look at a phased rollout. You've just shown that you're not just listening to the words, you're understanding the entire political dynamic. That's decoding gold.
I love that. Okay, so what about the second layer, the more immediate context, the environment and the situation?
Right. The physical setting fundamentally changes the likely missing word. The environment constrains the possibilities.
Okay, give me an example.
You're on a small boat with a friend. A storm suddenly rolls in. Your friend yells over the wind, can you find the
tarp or the life jackets? Something to do with safety in the storm.
Overwhelmingly probable. Now, to take that exact same verbal fragment, can you find this? But you're in a university archive, digging through old boxes.
Then it's the file from 1888 or the missing letter. The request is completely different because the situation is completely different.
And this is where we can use storytelling to really practice this skill.
Okay, let's try one. Let's set a scene. An archaeologist, Dr. Evans, and her junior colleague, Sarah, are deep inside a newly discovered tomb. Dr. Evans is looking at a cracked support beam. She murmurs, we have to watch this, otherwise the ceiling might.
Okay, context A. They just heard a loud grinding noise after stepping on a pressure plate. The context is immediate danger, so the decode is obvious.
Collapse on us. It's a direct warning.
Right. Now, context B, they've been discussing atmospheric damage to the frescoes for the last hour. She said the exact same thing. We have to watch this, otherwise the ceiling might.
In that context, it's not about immediate death. It's about preservation. The decode is something like, be permanently damaged by the humidity.
It's a perfect demonstration of how the entire function of that sentence changes with the context. And we really encourage you, as you listen to this, to start doing this mentally. When you hear an unfinished sentence, just pause and predict the ending. It's like a workout for your inference skills.
It also means you really have to be present in the conversation. If you're distracted by your own thoughts, you miss the setup, you miss the context, and the fragment is meaningless.
That's a really crucial point. Decoding successfully requires you to dedicate your mental bandwidth to the here and now of the conversation.
Okay, so as we go deeper into this toolkit, we have to talk about the silent majority of communication. You know, that old statistic that words are only a tiny fraction of the message. If we're only listening to the verbal part, we are missing almost everything.
We are. The nonverbal cues, body language, expressions, posture, they are the most immediate completers of an unfinished thought. They provide the emotional weight, the valence that the missing words were supposed to carry.
Let's start with body language and gestures. The body literally finishes what the words started.
Yes, think about this. You're working with a designer on a new website. They say, I just wish we could increase the visibility of the... And as they're saying it, they're rubbing their temple and sort of sweeping their hand across the whole screen.
Okay, so the verbal part is vague, but the nonverbal.
The nonverbal is crystal clear. Rubbing the temple implies stress, a headache. The sweeping motion defines the area. The decode is increase the visibility of the branding on the homepage because this layout is a mess and it's stressing me out. The gesture defines the object and the physical state defines the emotion.
So a pointed finger, a tap on a document, they're all providing the missing noun or verb.
To really see the power of this, let's go back to a narrative. Imagine a wizard is teaching an apprentice. The wizard says the potion requires a single dash of. And as he speaks, his hand just sort of floats toward a patch of glowing mushrooms on the shelf.
The apprentice doesn't even need the word. The gesture is the instruction. The body language is the cipher.
Exactly.
So what about facial expressions? And especially those really fast ones, micro expressions, they can be so telling.
The face is a constant, often unfiltered stream of data. If your boss says, this new policy is, but their eyes narrow and their mouth pulls into a tight little line.
You know it's not good.
You know the decode is negative. The face is saying the policy's fundamentally flawed or a huge mistake, even if they follow it up verbally with something polite like, gonna be a challenge.
And the research here from people like Paul Ekman is so critical. These microexpressions, they last just a fraction of a second, and they often betray an emotion someone is trying to hide.
And the nuance matters. Think about the difference between suppressed contempt and suppressed disgust. A colleague is asked about a rival's proposal. They say, that plan is certainly. If they flash contempt, that little one-sided lip raise, a sneer, the decode is critical. It's about the person or the idea.
So that plan is amateurish.
Right. But if they flash disgust, wrinkling the nose, raising the upper lip, it's more of a moral or sensory revulsion. The decode becomes, that plan is not just bad, it's morally repugnant. The specific microexpression tells you the specific flavor of bad.
That is the kind of detail you need for this to really work. So let's add another layer. Physical proximity and posture. How close we are, how we hold ourselves.
Proximity defines the nature of the conversation. If someone leans in close to you, minimizing that space, and whispers, about those rumors, I think the company is going to.
Yeah.
That closeness immediately signals confidentiality. It's important.
Okay, let's do a high-stakes office scenario. Layoff rumors are flying around. You see a colleague, Lisa, coming out of a closed-door meeting. She's standing rigidly, arms crossed, not making eye contact, and she whispers, the meeting was tough, and I think the decision is.
Every part of that posture is screaming anxiety. The crossed arms, the lack of eye contact, the low volume. It's protective. Her body is guarding the secret she can't finish verbally.
So the decode is bad news. The decision is happening tomorrow, and it's not good.
Exactly. Her body completes the sentence with dread.
This brings up a really important question, though. What happens if there's a conflict? If the words sound positive, but the body language is negative? I mean, especially if you miss that subtle cue, couldn't you get it massively wrong?
That's an excellent challenge. It really brings us to a fundamental rule of decoding. In almost every situation, especially with an incomplete thought, the nonverbal cue will override the verbal one.
The body doesn't lie.
The body doesn't lie as well as the voice does. The involuntary signals, the micro-expression, the posture are almost always completing the thought with the speaker's true feeling, not the socially acceptable one you're hearing. You have to trust the nonverbal.
So we've covered the visual. Now let's move to the auditory, the sound of the voice itself, which provides this whole other set of clues.
Absolutely. The acoustic properties of speech pitch, pace, volume, they build the emotional architecture for the unfinished sentence.
And tone and intonation are the most immediate clues, right?
They are. Intonation is critical for turn-taking. If a speaker's voice goes up at the end of a fragment, like a question, that's usually an open invitation for you to jump in and complete the thought.
An upward inflection.
But if the intonation falls, it signals finality. Resignation. And that's just how it is. There's no room for discussion.
And pitch and pace must reveal a lot about someone's internal state.
A huge amount. If someone's voice gets high-pitched and strained when they say, "Are you absolutely sure you want to invest in?" That high pitch is a huge red flag for anxiety or serious doubt.
And slowing down the pace, that's the classic suspense builder.
It is. If someone slows their speech way down, maybe even drops their voice and says, "The secret to the whole operation was," that pacing is a giant signpost saying the next piece of information is dramatic and important.
You see this in really charged situations. In a meeting about layoffs, someone says, "The impact on our people is," but their voice is trembling. That vocal cue alone tells you the decode is going to be devastating.
We could even use a story to highlight this. Imagine a detective in an interrogation room. He says to the suspect, "We know you were there, and the video shows you hiding the..." He says it all in a low, even voice, but he puts a sharp emphasis, a spike in volume, on the word hiding.
So that specific sound, that auditory cue,
it tells the suspect and us that the missing word weapon is the critical piece of the puzzle. The tone provides the evidence the sentence fragment is missing.
which brings us to a really crucial and complex factor: cultural and personal variations. We can't just assume a pause means the same thing to everyone, everywhere.
No, absolutely not. Decoding has to account for this. And this is where the idea of high context versus low context cultures becomes essential. It's a major source of decoding errors.
Okay, so high context cultures, like in parts of East Asia, rely a lot on shared understanding and keeping social harmony.
Exactly. Silence there often has a lot of weight. So in a business meeting, a potential partner might say, "Your proposed timeline is aggressive and it might be better if we..." And then they just stop.
A low-context speaker might hear that as a suggestion.
But because direct confrontation is avoided, that subtle trailing off is actually a very strong, "No, absolutely not. This timeline is impossible, and you need to figure that out without me saying it directly." The cultural context provides a very firm decode for a very soft phrase.
And in low-context cultures, like the US, we're generally more direct. So trailing off is used for other reasons.
Usually, yes. For emotional discomfort or for the tactile reasons we've talked about earlier, the decode relies more on the individual's personality.
Which is the other piece of this. You have to know the person. An extrovert might trail off just because they're excited and their brain is moving too fast.
And their decode is probably positive anticipation, but an introvert might trail off out of caution because they're weighing their words very, very carefully. Their decode is more likely about reservation or anxiety.
So let's try to synthesize all that with an example. Let's say you're working with a colleague from a high-context culture. You propose a really radical, risky idea. He pauses and then says, "That plan is certainly ambitious."
Okay. The word ambitious is ambiguous on its own, but you have to synthesize all the cues. The pause is a cultural sign of consideration, not agreement. The high-context background means direct criticism is unlikely. So you put it all together.
And the decode isn't a compliment.
The decode is a warning. That plan is ambitious, which means it's far too risky and likely to fail, though I would never be so rude as to say that to your face. A novice decoder hears ambitious and thinks they're getting praise. An expert decoder hears the warning.
So we've built the whole theoretical framework. Now it's time to put it all into practice. Let's talk about the real-world applications. Where are we going to see these fragments most often?
This is where the skill really transforms your daily interactions. Gives you a proactive way to handle ambiguity.
And you see it everywhere. In family context, for instance. A parent says, "Thanks for cleaning your room, but..." That "but" is almost always followed by an unsaid request.
It is. The decode is you still need to do the dishes, or your laundry is still all over the floor. The shared context of chores makes the expectation clear.
But the stakes get much higher in professional settings. Ambiguity at work, especially about money or people, can be really costly.
Immensely costly. Let's go back to that tense cross-departmental meeting we imagined. The head of finance, who we know is fiscally conservative, is reviewing a project that needs a big unfunded marketing spend. She leans forward, speaks slowly, and says, "The Q3 projection shows we have the capital for..." And she stops, but her eyes just flick for a second toward the marketing director.
Okay, so the decoding here has to be layered. The context is fiscal conservatism. The tone is deliberate, guarded, and the nonverbal cue is that tiny glance.
Right. She's using the unfinished sentence to signal a political reality without starting a war. The decode is, "We have the capital for our existing funded projects, but that marketing spend isn't one of them and it's not happening."
The person who catches that knows they have to start defending their budget immediately. The person who doesn't just hears the positive part and misses the threat completely.
And that's mastery. It's anticipating the fallout of what's unsaid. It's just as crucial in something like a job interview.
How so?
The interviewer might say, "We need people who can handle rapid change, and I see on your resume you worked at." And they pause, maybe tap their finger near the part about a failed startup.
They're not just asking a question, they're giving you a prompt.
They're inviting you to address the perceived negative, the failure, and spin it into a positive about resilience and learning. They're directing you to the most relevant part of your story.
To really get good at this, though, we need to practice. And you've said storytelling is one of the best ways to do that.
It is, because narratives engage the brain's mirror neurons. It's like a flight simulator for social interaction. You get to practice these high-stakes moments without the real-world pressure.
So to do this, you need to set up a story with all the key elements. The setup, the unfinished sentence, and the final, correct decode.
Exactly. Let's use an Adventure Quest story, but make the cues really specific. Our hero, Sir Kale, is looking for a mythical sword. He finds a cryptic map and takes it to an old vault keeper who has taken an oath of silence. The keeper can only speak in fragments. He points to an etching of the sun on the map and whispers, "The key to the gate lies in the reflection of the world."
Okay, so the whisper means it's a secret. The sun etching provides a celestial clue.
But then comes the critical cue. The old man reaches out and brushes some imaginary dust off Sir Kale's armor. And Kale knows his armor is made from lunar steel, a metal famous for being matte black and absorbing light.
Ah, so it's a trick. The key isn't the sun's reflection.
The key is the absence of reflection. The gesture towards the lunar steel armor provides the context. The decode is, the key lies the reflection of the moon, meaning the gate only opens at night or when there's no light.
That is some next-level inference. You have to synthesize the niche knowledge, the type of steel, with the immediate gesture.
And that is what practice through narrative does. It trains your brain to process all these different variables: tone, environment, gesture, special context, in a controlled way. It builds the confidence you need to do it in real time, under pressure.
Okay, theory and application are established. But to really master this, we need deliberate, consistent practice. So let's get into the actionable steps. What can you start doing today?
We should start with some rigorous daily drills. You can integrate this into stuff you're already doing.
Like listening to podcasts.
Exactly. Start with passive listening, but make it active. When you're listening to something, an audiobook, a news report, anything, the moment a speaker trails off, hit pause. Actually predict what they're going to say next based on the tone and context so far.
And then you unpause and see if you were right.
You check your prediction against the actual outcome. Doing that over and over again is a zero-risk way to train your inference muscles.
I like that. What else?
I would strongly recommend systematic journaling. Keep a little log of the unfinished sentences you hear during your day. Write down the fragment, the context, your decode attempt, and then what the real meaning turned out to be.
That feedback loop sounds critical. You see where you're going wrong.
It's non-negotiable for refining your accuracy, especially with nonverbal cues.
Okay, let's move on to interactive practice, because this is a social skill.
An excellent game for this is finish my thought. You do it with a friend or a group. You intentionally start a sentence about an ambiguous topic like, "The real reason that project failed was," and then you have to use only gestures, tone, and nonverbals to get them to complete it accurately.
So the goal isn't just to finish the sentence, but to guess the intended emotion behind it. The sarcasm, the disappointment.
Exactly. And for more high-pressure practice, I can't recommend things like improv classes enough. Improv is basically one long exercise in decoding your partner's incomplete signals to build a scene together. It forces the skill to become second nature.
What about a more analytical approach?
This is the most powerful tip, but it takes some commitment. With consent, of course, record some of your conversations. Later, listen back and focus only on those moments of hesitation or trailing off. Analyze your own reaction in the moment. Did you miss a shift in pitch? Were you not paying attention to a micro-expression?
That kind of objective feedback loop has to be how you really solidify the skill.
It is. Finally, you can use those advanced story-based exercises. Create role-playing scenarios. For example, the diplomatic riddle, where one person plays a diplomat from a high-context culture and the other from a low-context one. Success hinges on correctly decoding a polite, unfinished rejection.
Or even just writing prompts. Try writing a short story where the hero's survival depends on correctly interpreting a fragment, like a warning in a diary that says, "The only way out is when the shadow of the clock tower touches."
All of these exercises help you move from just understanding the theory to fluently, almost subconsciously, applying it. That's when you know you've achieved proficiency. It's about turning that abstract knowledge into an effortless art.
So to bring this all together, what we've really been talking about today is that decoding unfinished sentences is so much more than a simple communication trick.
It's an art form. It enriches your connections, and it strengthens your position in any conversation. The real skill is in weaving all the threads together in real time. The history, the context, the silent cues, the tone. When you can do that, the unsaid will always speak volumes to you.
Which brings us to our final thought for you to think about. The next time a conversation just trails off, try not to see it as vagueness. See it for what it often is, an act of implicit trust. The speaker is trusting that you share enough common ground to understand their real intent. So the question is, what deeper insight, what moment of connection can you find in that brief but powerful silence?
Keep conversing, keep listening, and keep decoding. Your future interactions will thank you for the depth you bring to them.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into advanced communication skills, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We'll see you next time.